Hi everyone, I'm Praseeda Nair. Welcome to the much anticipated media masterclass session that we promised you last week. And those of you who joined us last week would have had a bit of a taster. And the reason why we put this together is because we want to give you as SME owners a sort of insight into the opportunities that you have in terms of getting your brand out there, getting the story around your brand out there, and getting yourself, your profile out there in the market. So love it or hate it, the media is still an influential way of raising your public profile. And whether it's your own profile or your company's profile, or even about a new product, it's a really great way to have that public presence. So getting press coverage has been a tried and true method for centuries. But it's not a simple matter of just sending out emails and hoping for the best, hoping that the mail online will pick it up. So what is the sort of secret behind getting media coverage? Like all good things, successful media publicity is the result of hard work and careful planning. And the best part of it is I've put together a seven-step blueprint to help SME owners get their foot through the door, like just get started on that media journey. Before I get ahead with our plan, I just wanted to quickly introduce myself. So my name is Praseeda Nair. I am the editorial director of Real Business and Business Advice. They are the two most widely read SME focused titles that are content platforms. We're online magazines essentially. And our entire ethos is about getting your stories out there to the wider SME community. And in terms of my background, I am an international business journalist. I have worked across 3 continents and I've worked with NGOs, I've worked with large companies, and I've worked with small businesses as well. And my entire thing, again, is about getting you brands out there and getting your voices out there. So without further ado, I'd also like to introduce Lisa, who's on this webinar with me. And Lisa will be managing the chat box and engaging with you. And you'll probably see a lot more of her as we continue our series.
Hi everyone, welcome. As Praseeda said, I'm the Community Engagement Director for Prosper². I've only been with the business a few weeks, but you'll probably be seeing a lot more of me. So today I'm logistics and Praseeda's content.
All right, so the secret to the presentation, like the reason why I'm doing this, it's not rocket science, it's not hard. I just want to leave all of you with the knowledge that it's very much in your control. It's never about if you think you're worthy of being in the media, if you're worthy of getting coverage. It's never about that. It's about whether you're ready to talk about yourself and put your business ahead. So let's get started. So we've talked about this last week. If you joined me, you might have remembered me talking about paid, owned, and earned media. If you weren't there last week, no problem. I'll just quickly summarize. Paid media is whenever you literally pay for coverage or exposure. So it could be billboards, it could be advertising, it could be an article that's paid for in a supplement. Owned media is any sort of platform that you have your brand attached to. For example, your YouTube channel, your LinkedIn, your Twitter, your Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, you name it, any social media. It's also your company website. It's also your company blog if you have one. And it can even be your customer case study section on your website, or any white papers, reports, or lead magnets that you might create to get customers interested. So again, this is the beautiful overlap between marketing and media. And it's very closely tied, because at the end of the day, you want to get your brand out there, because that brand recognition is part of the marketing funnel and eventually the sales funnel. And with earned media, this is why there are those really cheesy 1996 looking graphics on the earned media box on my presentation, because that's the key that people still look for. So a couple of decades ago, that was the best way of getting mileage. When a third party, an independent publication, speaks about your business, speaks about you, and promotes you in that way, it was the best kind of endorsement, because the idea is the media is supposed to be unbiased and they're saying you're great for a reason. So that was the leverage that a lot of companies used to use. But as time's gone on, and I guess a lot of people have been talking about this as well, the media has been losing credibility in many ways. There's a lot of fear about fake news. There's a lot of fear about being sellouts. And the fact of the matter is that media outlets have been closing at a very fast rate, very fast. Like you'll get whiplash if you kept in track of like all the magazines that have shut down. Print media is near extinct. And with digital, it's constantly evolving. And as it's democratizing, as everybody becomes their own influencer, their own sort of citizen journalist, people are starting to question the value of traditional media. However, it's still the easiest and quickest way to get the public recognition you need without tooting your own trumpet. All right, so step one, focus on your purpose and your own personal story. What I mean about this is that you know why you started your business. You know why you get out of bed every morning. You know why you've made your first hire. You've grown your first business clientele. You know why you do what you do. But do you talk about it enough? This is a key thing that comes up when I work with small businesses. A lot of times they are doing incredible things. They're trying to change the world in some cases. And in some cases, they're just doing things in such a disruptive and new way that everyone should know about it. But there's that reticence to talk about it because perhaps there's a shyness about sharing your own personal story and maybe oversharing your personal story. So what I found really interesting while speaking to small businesses is those who do talk about their personal adversity, the challenges they've had, people who are very forthright and like forthcoming with the pain they face, they're the ones who get the most media attention. And I promise it's not because we're sadists, we're really not. It's only because human interest is the most important thing. At the end of the day, we're just humans. Journalists are humans too. And it's about that people-to-people connection. So it's not about business-to-business message. It's not about business-to-consumer even. It's just person-to-person. So when you can speak to a journalist like a human being and you can be vulnerable with your personal story and share what you feel comfortable sharing, that creates a rapport that can last a lifetime. So starting your personal story, why you started your business, what got you into the sector you're in, and what problem are you trying to solve? That's going to help you create your media pitch. All right, so quickly moving on to some of the key human interest-based interviews that we've done recently on Real Business. I find this very fascinating. So this couple launched this company. They just make hats really, but they make old time hats look cool. And the whole thing they did was use a personal story to get into the Hollywood scene, and the rest is history. So how did they pitch to the media? How did they come to our attention? They came out and they said, listen, we've had previous careers. We decided as a married couple to start a business. But it's really interesting to see how they use their personal relationship and their personal relationship with fashion and being hatters and milliners to reach historical dramas and other kind of Hollywood TV shows and movies that need those kind of old-timey costumes. And then, of course, it's making a fashion statement. And before you know it, they're all over London. So the next thing is Liberty London. This is a great example of, again, sort of triumph over adversity, that kind of storyline. So there are a couple of different things you can find the quirkiest thing that makes you unique, like the milliners did before. The second kind of way in is to use a story that's personal and sad and how you overcame those challenges, because everybody loves a good success story. And this is a great example as well. Titania spoke to us about how she started this hobby. She felt like her life was falling apart and she turned it around, and now her hobby has made her into a full-time entrepreneur. So again, very nice, happy ending. And another household name in many places, Planet Organic. This was also very, very unique because she was so vulnerable with us. She literally told us, and you can read it right there. It says, having immigrated from the US to the UK to date a man she met on a London night bus, Renee Elliott recalls her first day working in a publishing house. And that just already sets the scene. It already wants you, like it kind of hooks you in. You want to know about this woman. What did she do, taking such a big romantic leap of faith? And how did that lead her to being such a successful business owner? So keep all that in mind. Moving on to step 2. The next big thing is to set realistic goals. And it's really important to ask yourself, why do you want media coverage? Like, what is it? Is it to put it on your social medias and feel good about yourself? Which is a valid thing, by the way. There's nothing wrong with that. Boosting your own public profile is a crucial part of being a business owner. So if it's just that, that in itself is valid. But if you do see media coverage as an outlet, part of your marketing funnel, and something that you want to eventually lead to some sort of return, then you need to start thinking about a long-term media strategy. And we're talking about a proper PR strategy. And right now, PRs outnumber journalists 1 to 5. So for every journalist, there are 5 PRs calling them, pitching stories, pushing angles. But the good thing about having an agency is that they will take the headache about telling your brand story and all of that off of you. You don't need to do that. They will handle all that, finding angles. Plus, they already have a black book of journalists that they can contact for different angles and different needs. But if you're doing it on your own and you don't have a budget for a PR machine, then that's where setting realistic goals is so important. You need to figure out what role media plays in your marketing strategy, and you need to be very specific. What I mean by that is having an actual idea of what you want to do. Do you want to have monthly coverage? Do you want to write on LinkedIn Pulse and share that blog on Medium? Do you want to use your own channels first and then use that to pitch journalists? How do you want to do it? So starting with realistic goals will help you, because you'll know how many pieces of coverage you want to achieve and why. And how will this media coverage lead to sales? Are you targeting the right outlets that your end users read? So that's a really, really important question you need to ask yourself. And another part of that is creating checklists. So this is a great example. You could write month by month. These are your goals. What does that mean? In this example, this company has created an actual media kit. And that's a nice place to start, where you literally have an about us, where you write your story. Joe and I started a business when we were 15, etc. Remembering the human interest angle. Remembering what you would say at the pub when you're talking about what you do. So keeping that human connection in mind, creating a media kit includes your story, what you do, what makes your business unique in the market, who you're working with. If you can get customer testimonies, that'd be great. And as an added bonus, topics you're passionate about or you have an authority to speak about. That's going to really help you, because later on when you do talk to people in the media and they tell you what they're, well, nowadays journalists write about everything, like we're wearing so many hats, but usually people have a beat. So for example, if you're at a party or you're at a networking event and then you meet a journalist who's on a fashion beat, then of course, if you're a hatter, like the previous example, that's easy. You can just talk about fashion and that angle is easy. But what if you're a manufacturer of plastic bottles? How do you talk about fashion? So it's finding what makes you unique and what you're passionate about. If you manufacture plastic bottles because you're passionate about the environment and you want to control the supply chain and you want to talk about the role of the plastics industry in recycling, then you can use that and talk about sustainable fashion and then hook the interest of the fashion journalist. So that's why having a checklist, having a media kit can really help you hone in on your specialties and your areas of passion and focus. And it just makes it much easier to go, because it's already here. It's all in your head already. So it's just a matter of like, which one do I pick? This person likes media. They like movies. I'll talk about this angle. This journalist writes about current affairs. I'll talk about this angle. Because at the end of the day, you're still a human being in your own right, and you have that right to have a platform. And this brings us to building journalists up as friends, or at least work acquaintances, if that makes sense. And it's hard when you're running your own business. You've got all these relationships to manage. Do you really have time to build relationships with random journalists? It's a difficult question and only one that you can answer. But there are a couple of perks here. For one thing, if you build a long-term relationship with journalists, they will remember you and they'll remember what you do. And every time they write about anything relevant to your industry, your sector, your areas of interest, they will call you. And before you know it, it can also open up discussions for you to be a contributor. And that is almost the highest level, I would say, of media exposure. It's one thing if you are called upon for an interview where you get that entire share of voice, as we call it in the sector. You own that space when you're the only person being interviewed. There's another type of coverage, which is being featured as a sort of a quote in a larger story. So the larger story might be about your sector, your industry, or a recent current affairs related subject. For example, the autumn budget, everyone's commenting on it. You might be asked by a journalist about your thoughts about corporate tax or whatever it is. And then you'll be featured alongside multiple other entrepreneurs and influential people. That is a share of voice article in a feature. Again, that gives you exposure, but again, you're not in control of the entire narrative. And then the third type of coverage that's very beneficial is if you're put in the position of authority. If you're a panelist, if you're speaking on an interactive seminar, webinar, live podcast, or whatever it is, again, you own that portion of the narrative. But for me, the highest level of media exposure is when you become a contributor, when you actually are seen as a voice of authority in a space and you write opinion editorials and you become essentially a columnist for different outlets. That's when you completely control that space. To get to that level, you need to build these relationships with the media. So for small businesses that don't have the budget for a PR machine, like I mentioned, there are a couple of tools that you can use. So there's a website called Response², one word, Response². And that basically gives you a PR newswire option where you can input your press release and it will reach the inboxes of journalists who are interested in those sectors. So that's one option. And it's again on a budget. It's quite affordable. Another one is called journalrequest.com. It gives you PR opportunities because it collates all the hashtags on social media from journalists asking for people to share their views. I personally use it all the time on Twitter, especially, where you just go hashtag journal request. And if you don't want to use a website, you can just look for those yourself as well. So that's an easy way to get your message out there on a budget. And also an easy way to find journalists because you'll see who's using that quote, like that hashtag, and what they usually write about. So that's an easy way to do it. Another really simple thing to do is to check small business blogs. In fact, like a lot of times when I Google myself, and I do so very freely, and I'm happy to, and I encourage everybody to Google themselves regularly. When I do Google myself, I do find myself appearing in these blogs about being influencers in the SME space, journalists you should know, etc. There are lots of blogs out there that will give you that information. SME journalists, business journalists, people you should be in touch with right now. There's so much information out there, so I hope that helps. So this is about crafting the perfect pitch. You need to focus on your first hero story. So again, going back to the first two slides, it's about finding your voice, finding out who you are, how you want to leave your customers feeling, and eventually the readers, because at the end of the day, you're going to reach out to publications that reach readers who are also your customers potentially. So find your hero story and understand your customers as well. Like, who are these people? What interests them? So for example, if your customers are consumers, and let's say they're women aged 18 to 55, then perhaps your best bet would be to reach publications like Cosmopolitan magazine or Glamour or whatever it is based on the demographic and on the product as well. If you're running a business that is specifically for auto mechanics, then you need to find like a trade publication that's only for auto mechanics. So that helps you when you're putting your pitch together. Because when you're pitching to the news desk at Cosmopolitan magazine and to Auto Mechanics Review, it's going to be different pitches. You can't pitch to two different publications the same way. So it's really important to know who your customers are and how to write for the media based on who those customers are. You need to do your research because you need to know who to email. That's really important. So journalists, most of us get pitched about 50 emails a day, just pitches. That's 50 emails, just pitching what they do. That's on top of all the other spam. Because I know, like, when I go on holiday, I come back to like 3,000 emails unread, and they're mostly just, I have a great business. It's amazing. Write about me. Why? So that's the key here. When you craft your perfect pitch, you need to explain what you do in the first line. You need to have something so exciting that it shows up as a preview in the journalist's inbox. So you need to know, first of all, who to email. If this is a story, it's a human interest story, then you need to know who writes about this stuff usually. So do your research in terms of the publications, but also the individual writers, the reporters, the editors who talk about these things openly. If you check their social media, you also see the things they tweet and retweet. Even if they're not the ones who created those tweets, they will promote that kind of content, then you understand their interest. For example, on my Twitter, I often share things that are related to leadership and productivity, because that's a passion of mine. Psychology, mental health, that's a passion of mine. Empowering people of all backgrounds is a passion of mine. So knowing that makes it easier. If you want to talk to me, in the first line, you can be like, mention, insert passion here, and gear your story. So that's an easy way. Once you get the first piece of coverage, milk it. So a third of you have already said that you've had national coverage. Milk it. That needs to be on your website. You need to link to the article, and you need to make sure that you are shouting about that one piece of coverage. Then use that same piece of coverage in your next pitch, and you can say, I was featured in the Times, and this is what they had to say, but I want to talk to you about it because I want to go more in depth about my business story, for example. And again, create an interest angle. If you don't have a human interest angle, you can make it. You can make it, because at the end of the day, you created your business for a reason. So just remember that and bring that out to the surface. And the last bit, which is really useful, if you're not ready for a full-blown feature, centerfold lifestyle, you can do something called a news hijack, which is where there's something trending and you have a point of view, a unique point of view that reflects your role in the industry and your role in your business. And you can hijack the news. And you can start that with your own channels on social media. And then you can also reach out to different journalists. For example, I mentioned the autumn budget. Another great example would be something like with the coronavirus news that comes out almost weekly. So let's say with the business interruptions loan announcement from the chancellor, that would be a great time for you to then say, our business took out this loan and this is how we dealt with it. And I have something to share. And then you can use the relevant hashtags and get interest that way. So it's always about having a unique perspective and a unique point of view. So again, this is really important. Before you even start a conversation with the media, you need to start, your assets need to be in place. What I mean by that is you need to have professional pictures. If you're a products-based company, manufacturing, whatever it is, if you have tangible products, they need to have high resolution images that can go in a print magazine or online. And if you're creating any sort of content based on topics that are useful, like a survey that you might have run with your customers, or you've created an infographic based on data, all of those things need to be available to the media when you pitch right away. There's no point of saying, I've got this idea, what do you think? And then send it later, because you might only have one shot. And if they don't respond to you, it's just completely normal, because most of us are so flooded with pitches. It's just a simple case of following up in 3 working days. And if you've already had a conversation, there's nothing wrong with picking up the phone and giving them a call. And if it's a no, it's very important that you have that confidence to ask for feedback and find out why it wasn't for them, because that's going to help you with the next round of pitching. And make sure that you share your availability for interviews. You can say, I'm available on this day, this time, and give multiple options. So once you have the first few pieces of coverage in, it's really important to keep an eye on your goals. Have you reached them? And what is the yardstick like right now? What does good coverage mean to you? Is it good coverage if you have a complete ownership of the narrative, if you're the only person being interviewed? Or is it good coverage when you're just getting your point of view across in a hot button topic? So figure out what's important to you, what's important to the business, and what you want to get out of that media coverage, and focus on doing more of the good. And the most important thing is also keeping check of what you've actually learned from this, because every opportunity, if you're misquoted, if you're misrepresented, it's a great opportunity for you to respond in a way that makes you proud and makes your business get maybe a second wave of attention. It's like every time there's a screw up, like a media fail, a PR disaster, you can see the good companies that survive are the ones that address it head on, make the apologies they need to make, and fix it and move forward. It's the same with media coverage. You can't make a mistake, because even if you make a mistake, you can fix it and it could do you more good. So it's just like there's no such thing as bad publicity kind of ideology. And the last thing is about paying it forward. Make sure that you put the coverage you get everywhere on all of your channels. Share the links with all of your friends, your family, your customers, your contacts, everybody. And make sure that you shout out the media outlet and the specific journalist, because that goes a long way. A lot of times people see the coverage that we give them and then they'll forget us. And it's kind of like, hello, why? Because we're trying to build our profile too. So it's just a nice way of paying it forward. And the journalist will definitely remember you in the future. If you go, I was featured in the publication by journalist, it will really go a long way. Another thing you can do is you can create a click to tweet, or like you can even create the social media text and the links and the tags that you want people to share, and share that internally with your staff so they can all use their individual platforms to big up the coverage the company received. And I think another great way to do it is to make sure that you have a section on your website saying press, or what the media say about us, and have that on a rotating sort of carousel so people can see where you've reached whom and how you've done in the media. So that's basically the 7 steps. Well, thank you, Lisa, for helping me today. And thank you, everyone, for being engaged and sharing your stories and just being here with me. So thank you for your time, and I will see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.